the best nominee for the Democratic Party. We must nominate somebody who does not say that the way to lead is to go backwards in time, demographically, in public policy, rhetorically. We're not going back to normal, folks. It was what was going on already. The symptoms that led to the circumstances that led to Donald Trump getting elected president in the first place. Andrew Yang says it. Donald Trump is not the problem. He is a symptom of the problem. And he is the candidate who says that very clearly. In late March, right when I signed on, we did a meet and greet in Plymouth, New Hampshire, at the Common Man. And it was the most ideologically diverse audience I had seen in 20 years of presidential politics. I saw Trump voters, and Bernie voters, like I was, and Hillary voters, and Jill Stein voters, and Harry Johnson voters, and people that never voted before, and people that swore they would never vote again. All right? Everything. One of them was wearing the classic MAGA t-shirt, red t-shirt, white letters. You've seen it before. And I went up to him after, and I'm like, sir, you have just spent 90 minutes in a room listening to an Asian American young man tell you that he wants to give every American citizen $1,000 a month for the rest of their lives. Have you attended the correct meeting? And he said, I have, and here's why. After 2.5 years of being a Donald Trump supporter, he said, I now realize that Donald Trump was the wrong answer to the right question, and that Andrew Yang uniquely is the right answer to the right question. Now you might be asking what I asked, and what the hell's the right question? And he said this: how come in a time of record high GDP, and record high stock market, and record low inflation, and record low unemployment, these are the numbers that we have been told our entire lives suggest without doubt that you should be enjoying right now the greatest peace of mind, economic prosperity, that you should have the financial security that will make you in a good place to retire, and even more importantly, that will guarantee that your kids will have a better standard of living than you yourself have. Well, here's the facts. In the 1940s, if you were born, it was 93% likely that your children would have a higher standard of living than you did. Fast forward. If you were born in the 1990s, that number is now less than 50%. The American dream at its core is that the next generation will do better than we do if they do the work and if we do it together. But that is no longer a guarantee. In fact, it is more likely not so. And that, at its core, are the symptoms that got Donald Trump elected in the first place. And so the MAGA man at that event last March in Plymouth said, I've been told all these numbers are right. So how come, despite the fact all these things I've been told to be true, now I see that most of my friends are walking an economic tightrope with no safety net underneath. That is the reality of America today. Let me ask you this. How many of you have seen Andrew Yang in person before? That's pretty good. This is not a trick question, but you can only raise your hand once. How many of you are seeing Andrew Yang in person for the first time? Look at that. And this is about the 15 stop in what is a 19-stop public trip of 4.5 days. We are tired. And a 4-day trip that we concluded about a week and a half ago. These were the first times that I've seen what I saw again just now. For most of the last 9 months that I've been traveling with Andrew, both in New Hampshire and around the country, the reality is that when I asked those questions, 80% of you would raise your hands when I said, who has seen him before, and only 20% when I said, who, for whom, is this the first time? You just saw it. This is not a plant, or else that'd be quite a sophisticated plant audience. It is virtually the opposite now. And that was true in Hampton, where we just were a few minutes ago. And it was true in Bedford, what used to be one of the most Republican towns in the state, filled with people, including people that told me to my face they were lifelong Republicans. They even voted for Donald Trump, and they are with Andrew Yang now, and he is the only Democrat, they say, who they will support in the general election against Donald Trump. This is the reality, and these are the stakes. This is the opportunity. How many of you here would call yourself entering the room tonight Yang Yang? Yeah! Yang Curious. That's right. Give yourself a hand, Yang Curious. You know, in the Yang campaign, we have another name for Yang Curious. It's soon to be Yang Day. That's right. Right? Now, this is the point in my remarks where I usually have expected by now the candidate to be here. Really? It's a true story. I spent 33 minutes at Exeter waiting for 5 minutes to go. How much time do I have? I have 1 minute. Great. I think that's true. This is what I'll tell you. I have a special surprise for you that before this trip we had not had in New Hampshire before. This is pretty cool. Andrew Yang is a really smart guy. Yeah. And if you didn't know, you'll see that by the end of this evening. Just his mind is so fast, his values are right on the mark, he is in it for the right reasons. He is the person that can defeat Donald Trump and be the transformational president at the time that we need it most. I would not be spending the time I am with this guy if I didn't believe all that. But, you know, faith is the belief in things unseen, and you don't have to have faith in what I'm saying. Because I have the best evidence coming out in 1 minute that he is an awfully smart guy. His wife, Evelyn. I met Evelyn on this trip, obviously has been part of the Yang family here. She is a remarkable woman. She, like Andrew, like myself, like I suspect many of you, is a first-generation American. She is an accomplished professional in the private sector, a graduate of Columbia. This is somebody who is smart and elegant and articulate, somebody who has now transformed from the private sector and is now at home with their 2 young sons, ages 7 and 4. The 7-year-old Christopher, as you'll hear tonight, is on the autism spectrum and has opened my eyes and the eyes of so many others involved in this 2020 political cycle in understanding the needs of so many and a growing number of kids in our country. A few days ago, Evelyn and I did a program in Concord where I realized, we talk about special needs children. Those special needs children are going to become special needs adults. And that's about public policy, and it's about compassion, and it's about being sophisticated and being honest. And I have not seen a candidate for president or his or her spouse that has talked so openly about what I think is a subject that still has some stigma and some sensitivity to it. And what they have done in a short amount of time on that critically important topic is remarkable. So we're pretty lucky, because in a minute you get to see the next president of the United States. But right now, I get to introduce the next First Lady of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, give a really warm Dover, New Hampshire, first in the nation, best in the nation, round of applause for the next First Lady of the United States. There she is, Evelyn Yang.
Andrew's campaign message is humanity first. That includes all of us. He says all the time, it's not left, it's not right, it's forward. His intention was loud and clear from the start. He's not here to play partisan politics. He's never dreamed of being president or even being in politics. His goal is to solve the problems and improve the everyday lives of Americans. Of course, $1,000 a month can't solve all our problems. We as a country have a lot of big systemic issues to work on. And if you look into any of Andrew's 150 plus policy proposals, then you know that he fully intends to do that work. But the Freedom Dividend is a critical first step in the right direction. It will pave the road ahead so that millions of Americans can lift their heads up and plan and save for a rainy day and look forward to a brighter future. That is why I so embrace my husband's work putting humanity first. What humanity first means to me is investing in people first. This will supercharge our families and supercharge our communities. As Andrew puts it, it's the trickle-up economy, from our people and our families up. What really bewilders me is this completely top-down approach that all politicians seem to make. It's common sense that you also need a bottom-up approach. What about putting resources directly into people's hands so that they can make the best decisions for themselves and for their families? Andrew is the only one talking about tackling the biggest problems that we face as a nation from a people-centered way. It's why the more people hear from him, the more they want to hear from him. He makes too much sense. And then you realize this is what we've been missing in politics. Now, the man you've been waiting for, please join me in welcoming the next President of the United States.
But then I say, thank my wife. Because number one, she let me run in the first place. And number two, she's been sacrificing more than anyone, taking care of our boys while I've been on the road. I love you so much, baby. Thank you for being the rock that's held our family together and kept us strong. Thank you. I love you. I love campaigning here in New Hampshire, in part because I went to high school here in the state. How many of you know I graduated from high school here in New Hampshire? Yeah, Phillips Exeter Academy, 1992. They had me back to speak a little while ago when I said I hadn't been back since graduation because I didn't really enjoy myself that much there. And then the student body erupted in applause, and I was like, oh man. So after Exeter, I went to college in Rhode Island at Brown University, not that far from here. Wow, that seldom gets applause. And then I went to law school in New York, became an unhappy attorney for 5 months, and then left to start a business. How many of you have started a business or organization or club or mailing list? So if you have your hand up and you started something, you know a couple things. Number one, it's much harder than anyone ever lets on. And number two, when someone asks you how it's going, what do you say? Great. My business too went great until it failed. My parents still told people I was a lawyer because they thought it was a better story and they're Asian. But I've been bitten by the bug. I said I want to try and learn how to build an organization. I worked at a small company again, and then another, and then another. I became the CEO of an education company that grew to become number one in the United States and was bought by a bigger company in 2009. Now, 2009 was a very tough time in so much of the country. It was the heart of the financial crisis. How was that time here in Dover for you all? First, how many of you were here in New Hampshire 11 years ago? So how was the financial crisis in your community? Yes, the opposite of great. It's true. You know, when I was here in New Hampshire last week, a 14-year-old boy raised his hand and said it was really, really hard. And I looked at him and said, how would you remember? You were 4 at the time. And he said, well, my family had to sell their house. So I remember it well. And I was like, wow, you would remember that. It was a devastating time in so much of the country. And I thought I had some insight as to why our economy had crashed. It was in large part because so many of the wannabe whiz kids I'd gone to Exeter and Brown and Columbia with had gone straight to Wall Street and come up with mortgage-backed securities and derivatives and exotic financial instruments. And I thought, what a train wreck that is. That's the opposite of what we should have our people do. So I thought, well, let's see if I can help change that. And this is where, again, I'm grateful to Evelyn. First, how many of you work in a nonprofit now? How many of you volunteer for nonprofits? For that one, you should just pretend and raise your hand. It's like, how many of you are good people? I'm good. So I give credit to Evelyn because I went to her and said, hey, I'm going to quit my job and start a nonprofit that's going to train entrepreneurs and create thousands of jobs around the country. So how do you start a nonprofit? The way we started a nonprofit is I asked Evelyn if it was okay if I put some of our savings into this 501c3 that I started. And then I started calling rich friends with this question. Do you love America? Then the smart among them said, what does it mean if I say yes? And I said, at least $10,000. And so 12 of them said, I love America for $10,000. So we started with a couple $100,000. I grew to the millions. And over the next 7 years running this nonprofit, I helped create several thousand jobs in 15 cities around the country. In Detroit, Cleveland, Baltimore, Birmingham, and other cities that could use a boost. Saw so much of the country I'd never seen before. How many of you grew up here in New England or upstate New York like me? Like this general vicinity? How about the Midwest? The South? West Coast or Mountain West or Pacific Northwest? Now, I had never been to Alabama or Louisiana or Michigan or Missouri prior to running Venture for America. And I was staggered by the gulf between regions, where if you fly between St. Louis and San Francisco or Michigan and Manhattan, you felt like you were crossing decades and dimensions and ways of life and not just going a few time zones. But I was still surprised when Donald Trump became our president in 2016. And you all remember that night well. How did you react to his election?
Not great, right?
Shock, tears. Someone said bourbon. Evelyn and I had a similar reaction, where to me it was a giant red flag that tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided to take a bet on the narcissist reality TV star as our president. This was not business as usual. And though many of us were very saddened by this outcome, we all have family members and friends and neighbors who were excited by his victory. In part because they thought it might be something different. Now, if you were to turn on cable news that night, or any night since then, honestly, why would you think that Donald Trump won and is our president today? Russia? Electoral college? Hillary Clinton? Unhappiness?
They believed you.
Poverty? Public education? Emails, electoral college, racism, Facebook, social media, Facebook. Now, all of these factors all mushed together into some kind of strange brew said this is why Donald Trump is our president. But Dover, I'm a numbers guy, and I went looking through the numbers for an explanation, and I found it. We blasted away over 4 million manufacturing jobs over the last number of years in this country. And where were those jobs primarily based? Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, all the swing states that Donald Trump needed to win and did win. You all may know this personally because the same thing happened here in New Hampshire a little bit earlier. You all lost over 12,000 manufacturing jobs, mainly in the northern part of the state. And if you have been to those towns, you see that after the plant or mill closed, the shopping district closed, people started to leave, the school shrank, and that community never recovered. I saw the same thing in Missouri, Michigan, Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, and throughout the Midwest. And unfortunately, what happened to those jobs is now shifting to other parts of our economy. How many of you have noticed stores closing around where you live here in Dover over the last number of months? And why are those stores closing?
Losing money.
Amazon. So I realized that I've been shifting this way this whole time. And then it's like, they were like, I thought I had a good seat. What's up with that? I'll start doing this like slow rotation. So Amazon is soaking up $20 billion in business every single year, closing 30% of America's stores and malls. Most common job in our economy is retail clerk. The average retail clerk is a 39-year-old woman who makes between $8 and $10 an hour. What is her next job going to be when the store closes? How much did Amazon pay in federal taxes last year? Zero. That's right, Dover. That's the math. 20 billion out, 30% of your stores closed, you get zero back. You all see the self-serve kiosks in the McDonald's and the CVS and the grocery store, but the changes are more pervasive than that. When you all call the customer service line of a big company and you get the bot or the software, I'm sure you do the same thing I do, which is you pound 000, say human, representative, human, until you get someone on the line. All right, raise your hand if that's what you do. Oh yeah, we all hate that software. We're like, please let this company still employ a human being after I start pounding keys for a while. But in 2 or 3 short years, the software is going to sound like this. Hey Andrew, how's it going? What can I do for you? It'll be fast, seamless, peppy, efficient. What is that going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work at call centers right now making between $10 and $14 an hour? How many of you know a truck driver here in New Hampshire? Driving a truck is the most common job in 29 states. There are 3.5 million truckers in this country. My friends in California are working on robot trucks that can drive themselves. They tell me that they're 98% of the way there. A robot truck just transported 20 tons of butter from California to Pennsylvania with no human intervention 2 weeks ago. Why did they choose butter? I have no idea. But if you Google robot butter truck, you will see that the trucks are here. And then in Pennsylvania, there was a giant stack of pancakes. So if these robot trucks are on the way, what will that mean for the 3.5 million Americans who drive a truck for a living, or the 7 million plus Americans who work at truck stops, motels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal every day? You can think about our highway system as a circulatory system, and the trucks are like little blood cells. But they carry not just the cargo in their trucks, they also carry economic vitality. Almost 10% of the jobs in Nebraska support trucks and trucking. So what will happen to those communities in Nebraska when the robot truck does not need to stop anymore? We're in the midst of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the Fourth Industrial Revolution. When is the last time you heard a politician say the words Fourth Industrial Revolution? 3 seconds ago. And Evelyn will tell you, I'm barely a politician. We used to joke that I'd make a terrible politician because I'm a below average liar. So these are the facts and figures that I was unpacking in 2017. Donald Trump wins in 2016. I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on? I then go through the numbers. I find that there's a straight up correlation between the adoption of industrial automation in a voting district and the movement towards Trump in that district. I know that artificial intelligence is now just leaving the lab and about to take off. I speak to a group of 70 CEOs in New York City. I ask them how many of you are looking at replacing your back office clerical workers with AI and software. And guess how many hands went up to go out of 70?
All of them.
All of them. And so I'm like, okay, I understand. We are scapegoating immigrants for problems immigrants have next to nothing to do with. We're in the midst of this historic economic transformation. So I went to our leaders in Washington, D.C., and I asked, what are we going to do to help our people manage this transition? And what do you think the folks in D.C. said to me when I asked them, what are we going to do? That's right. Study this further was one of them, for sure. In another event in New Hampshire, someone made this Scooby-Doo noise. It was like, whoa, whoa. So the responses I got were, study this further. Don't talk about it. That was literally the response. And we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. How many of you ever heard someone say something like that? Yeah, that's a very responsible sounding phrase. But I'm the numbers guy, and I said, look, I checked out the studies. You all want to guess how effective the government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest? You know it's low because I'm anchoring you low, but you also know it's low because you know people. You know human beings. You know that they're not going to all emerge from the factory and being like, sign me up for the coding school, and then like go off to... So the real success rates were 0 to 15%. They're a total dud. Of the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs, almost half never worked again. Of that group, half filed for disability. You then saw surges in suicides and drug overdoses in those communities to the point where now our life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years in a row. You know the last time America's life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row? The Spanish flu of 1918. A global pandemic that killed millions. You have to go back a century. It is highly unusual for the life expectancy of a developed country to ever decline. We ordinarily get richer, stronger, healthier, and it just keeps on inching up. But here in the U.S., it's gone down and then down and then down again. So when I said this to the folks in D.C., one of them said, well, I guess we'll get better at retraining then. And another person in D.C. said something that brought me here to you all in Dover tonight. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one here in D.C. will do anything about this because fundamentally, this is a town of followers, not leaders. And the only way we will do something about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads.
Yeah!
And I said, challenge accepted. I will be back with a wave in 2 years. And here we are. Dover, you may not know this, but you are the wave. You all are among the most powerful people in our country today. I'm going to give you one clue as to the power you have. Go ahead and hold up fingers and show us how many presidential candidates you've seen this cycle so far. So this would be 5. This would be like, 8, 9. He's got 20 here. 5. If you have a 1-up, I appreciate it. That makes me feel good. It means the TV ads work. So why are all the presidential candidates coming here looking for your support? It's because we have done the math. Do you know how many Californians each of you has worked? 1,000 Californians each. That's right. So look around this room tonight. How many of us are there? I'm going to give a Trumpian estimate. There are 3,000 people here. There are legitimately several hundred people here in this room tonight, which would be the equivalent of 7 football stadiums full of Californians. That is the amount of power that you all have to change the future of this country. To rewrite the rules of the 21st century economy so that they work for us, our families, and our kids. You all can do something that the rest of America only dreams about. Most Americans look up and they see our government as a series of pipes that are clogged with millions and millions of dollars of lobbyist cash and they despair they can do nothing about it. They are generally correct. They can do next to nothing about it. But you all can flush the pipes clean, just like that, in 31 days. I stand before you today. I'm fifth in the polls and rising to be the Democratic nominee. We raised $16.5 million last quarter in increments of only $35 each. So my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. But there's no corporate PAC money. This is truly an uprising of the people to retake our government and get it working for us again. So how do we actually get our economy working for us and our kids? Raise your hand if you're a parent like me and Evelyn. If you are a parent, you've had this sinking feeling at some point over the last number of years that we are leaving our kids a future that is far less stable and secure and prosperous than the lives that we have led as their parents. And it's not just climate change, which is one of the big things we think of in this regard. But it's also the fact that if you were born in the 1940s in the United States of America, there was a 93% chance that you were going to be better off than your parents. That's the American dream. That's what brought my family here, Evelyn's family here, in the sense that we were going to do better with each successive generation. If you were born in the 1990s, which I sense many of you were, you're down to a 50-50 shot and it's declining fast. That is one reason why Trump won. That is why the parents feel the way that we do. Because it's true. We are leaving our kids a much less stable and secure future than they deserve. So the question is, how do we turn it around and change it? If you're here tonight, at some point you heard that someone is running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. Raise your hand if you've seen that somewhere. Excellent. Love it. The ads work. I don't even know if we put that in the ads. I can't remember. Now, I know the first time you heard that, it sounded like a gimmick, too good to be true, would never happen, but this is not my idea and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country, called it the citizen's dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King fought for this in the 60s, called it the guaranteed minimum income, and it is what he was fighting for when he was killed in 1968. I know this in part because I sat down with Martin Luther King's son in Atlanta a number of weeks ago, and he said that this is what his dad was fighting for. It was so mainstream that 1,000 economists, including Milton Friedman, one of the fathers of modern economics, endorsed it in the 60s and it passed the U.S. House of Representatives in 1971, twice under Nixon. It's called the Family Assistance Plan, where it guaranteed an income level for all American families. And then 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? Alaska. And how do they pay for it? Oil. And what is the oil of the 21st century? Technology. Data, technology, AI, self-driving cars and trucks. A study just came out that said that our data is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you got that data check in the mail last month? If our data is now worth billions of dollars every year, who is getting all that money? Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, the trillion-dollar tech companies that are paying zero or next to zero in taxes back into our society. You see the game over? We're getting sucked dry, and the biggest winners are paying nothing or next to nothing. And I'm going to ask you all, whose fault is it that Amazon pays zero in taxes? Is it their fault? No, whose fault is it? It's our government's fault. You have to be pretty behind the curve to look up and say, Amazon, zero, sure. That's what we all have to change. That's what rewriting the rules means. If we get our tiny fair share of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, eventually every robot truck mile and AI work unit, and put it into your hands, build a trickle-up economy from our people, our families, and our communities up, we can turn this around very, very quickly. Particularly because when this money is in your hands, where will it go? How would you spend it? How much of it would stay right here in New Hampshire?
A lot.
Most of it. Not all of it. You might get your own Netflix password. But most of it would stay right here in your community. It would go to car repairs you've been putting off, and daycare expenses, Little League signups, nonprofits, religious organizations, Democratic Party dues perhaps. It would supercharge the things that we value most in our own lives. Right now we're being told over and over again that things are great. Record high corporate profits, record high GDP. Unemployment looks great. And yet we sense that maybe things are not that great in our own town, our own families, and our own communities. You know what else at record highs in the United States of America in addition to corporate profits? Stress, anxiety, financial insecurity, student loan indebtedness, depression, suicides, drug overdoses. If your life expectancy is going down and your corporate profits are going up, which do you listen to? We know which one DC is listening to. DC can't even see the people in life expectancy. DC is just staring at the money. I know how wrong our economic measurements are in part because of my own family. Evelyn is at home with our 2 boys every day, one of whom is autistic. How much does her work measure that in our economic measures every year? Zero. And it's not just Evelyn and every stay-at-home parent or every caregiver who's taking care of an ailing or aging loved one, or volunteers and activists in our community, or coaches and mentors who are trying to make people stronger, or 98% of artists, or increasingly local journalists because we put 2,000 local newspapers out of business because all of their advertising revenue went up to the internet. You know what doesn't work as well if you don't have local news? Democracy. Because how are you supposed to vote on what's going on in your community if you don't have any local news source? These are the things that we claim to value most highly in our lives. Family, community, democracy, and we're allowing them to get zeroed out one by one by one. And we're being told everything is okay because we have been taught to confuse economic value and human value and say they are the same things. That is how you will have people telling coal miners to learn to code. Because if the coal miner's job has no value, then they have no value. And so we're going to pretend we can turn them into something that has value that the market deems worthy. And what I'm saying to you all, Dover, and what we have to say to the rest of the country in 31 days is that we all have intrinsic value as Americans, as citizens. We say that our children have value regardless of anything else, and that we can look them in the eyes and say, we fought for a brighter future for them, their country loves them, their country values them, and their country will actually invest in their future. I am not running for president because I dreamt about being president. I have the fashion choices to prove it. In the Yang household, it was not like, you're going to be president someday. Like, that's not the way it was going on in the Yang household. I'm running for president because, like so many of you here tonight, I'm a parent and a patriot. I have seen the future that lies ahead for our kids, and it is not something I'm willing to accept. I will fight for something better. The rest of the country. We have to let them know the machines work for us, we do not work for the machines. We have to retake our nation's capital and make it work for us again. Washington, D.C. today is the richest city in our country. What do they produce?
Bad decisions.
No one knows, but business is good. We have to get what's going on in D.C. and return it to the people. I'm for term limits for members of Congress. done within 12 years and then come home. Their job should not be to go to DC and crouch there for as long as possible. After I'm your president for 8 years and do everything I can on your behalf, you will never hear from me again. We can make this country work for us again, New Hampshire, but we need you to get out and fight for it in 31 days. This is the message that can pull a country together. We're bringing in people who voted for Donald Trump, independents, libertarians, as well as Democrats and progressives. Donald Trump's our president today because he had a very simple message. He said he was going to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response?
Already great.
America's already great. Remember that? It's been a long 3 years, I know, Joker. But it's about to end. That response may not go over that well because the problems are real. We have to acknowledge the depth and severity and reality of the problems in our communities, but then we need real solutions to move us forward. What were Donald Trump's solutions? Build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. Dover, you know we need to do the opposite of these things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the real challenges of the 21st century. We have to evolve in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value. I am the ideal candidate for this job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you very much. So one of the problems we have is that if you're measuring things based on financial return, then things like climate change and quality of life get pushed by the wayside. I would make measurements of our health and environmental sustainability and mental health and freedom from substance abuse actually the measurements of our shared economy. And what this would do is, to your question, is this would highlight where there are inequities and where there are people that are being disproportionately impacted. We all know that when there's a natural disaster, who suffers the most? Poor people, which overlaps with people of color in this nation. What we need to do is not leave anyone on their own when they're a victim of climate change. And one of the frustrations I have is when politicians suggest that we need to prevent climate change. We need to accept that we are already on the curve. The last 4 years have been the 4 warmest years in recorded history. Have you all seen the photos of what's happening in Australia?
Yes.
my gosh, it's like this most mind-boggling science fiction nightmare come to life. I believe 1 billion animals have died as a result of those fires. And can you imagine the carbon emission that's resulting? So imagining that we can prevent this is, to me, not the right approach. What we should be doing is investing hundreds of billions of dollars in making our communities safer, stronger, more resilient, and more adaptive right now. I have been to Portsmouth, where there are buildings that are flooding more regularly than they had ever before, where shrimping businesses have shrunken and gone to zero because the water is warming. The effects are here with us now, and we need to start investing immediately. And if we invest right, then we'll be able to address even the concerns of the people that are being economically marginalized right now. And when you have a natural disaster, and we all know the poor people suffer, having resources in your own hands is actually the best way to protect you and your family, because there isn't that much warning when one of these disasters strikes. It's actually less expensive to invest ahead of time than it is after the fact. If you had to put a price tag on climate change, what do you think it would be? Trillions of dollars, thousands of lives. In many ways, the most expensive thing we can do is to just keep on going with business as usual. We need to invest in historic ways. The biggest challenge, Dover, is that America is only 15% of global emissions. So even if we were to go to zero, the Earth will continue to warm in all likelihood over the next number of years. And right now, in Africa, China is showing up and saying, we've got a coal-burning power plant for you. What do you think? And what does the African government say?
Bring it on.
Great. They don't care about how dirty the energy is. They just want energy. So what would we have to do to change that? We'd have to be there at that table, say, do not take the coal-burning power plant, take the solar panels instead, and we will subsidize them. So this is something that I'm very, very committed to. I would put a price on pollution day one and start moving us towards a more sustainable energy future. First day of my presidency. I assume that's yours.
When you're talking about people getting displaced from their current jobs, it seems like it's the kind of problem that we're starting to see more, and I totally understand that that could be a source of economic anxiety as well as just appearing on our economy generally. But when I think about the general problem of trying to, I guess, rehabilitate people or help them to find their way back into positions of the productive lives, $1,000 seems like not a lot to me if you're actually trying to make sense. And again, if people are being responsible and they're trying to build a savings and they weren't able to before, that sounds great. But I mean, if you're talking about the example you have, like a welder or a coder or something, if there's just no more welding jobs, if there's no more trucking jobs, it seems like you maybe have a situation where there won't actually be good opportunities there. So again, I totally understand that it's a good way to battle poverty and there are good source. Your ability to support the idea that happens, but I'd love to hear what your general thought is on that.
Sure thing. I like it. So the great thing about the freedom dividend is it ends up creating opportunities where people work and live. So if you imagine Dover, where everyone has an extra $1,000 a month, does the local garage, business, restaurant, daycare, tutoring service, do they all need to possibly ramp up for more demand? Yes. Do they end up hiring people in different capacities? Yes. So you end up having different types of jobs in someone's community because of the economic vitality, really. So if you think about the individual, does $1,000 a month make them perfectly happy, well off? No, not really. But does it end up creating a whole other set of opportunities where they are, so that if their current industry is drying up, that they have more options? Yes, it does. Does it give them more flexibility to pursue something? Yes. Possibly even go into a field that they hadn't been in before. What it does is it makes everything much more dynamic in our economy. And right now, there's a lot of friction in a lot of these things, and we all know this. It's like if someone said to you, hey, go get a master's degree, that's so much easier said than done. You know, like it's like there are a lot of hoops, and then it's super expensive, and you just hope it pays off. Right now, the dynamism is not there in our economy. Young people are starting businesses at multi-generational lows. People aren't able to really adapt in the way that they want. And so the $1,000 is not a fix for everything, but it does make everything much more fluid and dynamic. The other thing I would say is that this is not the only thing to do. Do we need to invest in vocational and technical and apprenticeship programs? Yes. Do we need to do more to help truckers transition? Yes. The big thing I would say is that I want the government to do something the government's actually good at. It's like, I can't stand when politicians are like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then everyone's like, yay, and then they walk away, and like, no one actually sees whether any of those things happen. But then the community ends up being devastated, and no one's really held responsible for that. So I want the government to do something it's excellent at, which is send large numbers of checks to large numbers of people promptly in the I would trust the government more to do that than I would the coding and training programs. Let's put that one. Thank you for choosing I might have. Especially with the large group, the biggest group of all time.
Hello, Elaine. How are you?
Hello.
My only question is, what do you plan to do to tackle the opioid crisis in our country? We have a big problem in people in my area, we're in the 90s. We're very stressed. We don't know what to do with ourselves. Would you make it more easier to tackle mental health in this, perfect country, or is it going to be more tackle to make it better?
I want to start with mental health. I would make mental health and freedom from substance abuse one of the core measurements of our economic progress. Because, again, what good is corporate profits going up if your people are sick and struggling? And my brother's a clinical psychology professor, so this is very near and dear to my heart, that we have a mental health crisis in this country, and we need to help. You know, one underrated aspect of our mental health crisis is technology. One of my friends in Silicon Valley said this: we have some of the smartest engineers in our country turning supercomputers into dopamine delivery devices for teenagers. And it has a really negative effect on their mental health. How many of you all are parents and concerned about your kids being addicted to screens? Yeah, me too. And when I was 12, I was a very nerdy kid. But when I went home, I could close the door and feel like I was alone, like sheltered from the world. Today, that introverted 12-year-old goes home, shuts the door, and they still feel like their classmates are in the room with them because they can just put up the phone and see what everyone's doing and saying and thinking. So we need to do everything we can to address the mental health crisis in our country, including having a counselor available in every school, and make this something we invest in for the long term. I also have a psychologist in the White House, and that's not a symptom of the current administration. I think it's a good idea. Now, to the opiate crisis, this is heartbreaking. Every event I go to, in New Hampshire in particular, there's someone who's lost a loved one to the opiate crisis. And the opiate epidemic is a disease of capitalism run amok. And what do I mean by that? Purdue Pharma dispensed millions of OxyContin prescriptions to our people and said this is a non-addictive wonder drug painkiller. It was incredibly addictive. They dispensed so many of these prescriptions that at one point the state of Ohio had more opiate prescriptions than human beings. And our government looked at that and said that is okay. Eventually our government figured out that it was not okay and fined Purdue Pharma $635 million, which sounds like a lot until you realize they made $30 billion and they got a 2% fine on initiating a plague that has destroyed lives of families and communities. So we need to do a lot of things to to try and make that right. First, we need to claw back tens of billions of dollars from the pharma companies and say we're going to use this money to help make our people strong and whole again. Now, the truth is that the opiate epidemic is not a money problem. No amount of money can give the mom and dairy her kid back, or it can get our people strong again. But money should not be the obstacle, particularly because our government turned a blind eye to this. And so as your president, I would say our government screwed up on a colossal level by allowing this to happen, and now we are going to make it right. We're going to put the resources in place so that you can actually have a fighting chance to get well. And then we should decriminalize opiates for personal use. If you're selling or dealing and profiting, you go to jail. But if you're an addict and struggling, we should refer you to counseling and treatment and not a prison cell. And I spoke to a high school senior who told me that his classmates had fentanyl patches on their shoulders and were addicted, but they would never seek help because they know it's illegal. And I looked into what other countries have done when they had substance abuse epidemics at this level, and the countries that decriminalized it ended up having lower abuse rates and lower overdose rates over time. If this is a disease that our government essentially allowed to happen, then we should not be prosecuting people who fall victim to this addiction plague. We just need to get them help and not say it's their fault.
Thank you for coming to New Hampshire. Several minutes ago, when you said, when everybody gets their $1,000 check, where do you think they'll spend it? The first thought that came to my mind, go to the computer and go shopping on Amazon. So what my concern is that, okay, automation, AI, take away so many of the traditional jobs. What my question is, what will you do to generate, to stimulate the new kind of jobs that are not going to be AI or automatable, and which will be the jobs in the local community that the people will spend their money on those businesses and not just go to the computer and go shopping at Amazon.
So if you imagine everyone in Dover getting that $1,000 a month, some of it would go to Amazon for sure, but a lot of it would flow through communities here. And the retail districts would change over time. So it might not be that your downtown stores are selling the same things that Amazon is selling, but they might be selling things that you can only get in person. You might have a whole series of, for example, yoga studios or things that obviously Amazon can't bring to you in your home. So there'll be jobs in communities as a result of this trickle-up economy. To the bigger picture, the question is, what are the jobs in the future? The jobs that are going to be subject to automation and AI are repetitive manual jobs and repetitive cognitive jobs. There are many, many jobs that will be with us for generations. And I'm going to give you an example from our own experience. Can you imagine what it would take to have a robot plumber show up to your house? It's essentially impossible. There's going to be a human plumber for a long, long time. And it's not just plumbers. We have a nationwide shortage of technical workers. And we are underinvesting in technical, vocational, and apprenticeship training at the high school level. In the United States, only 6% of our high school students are at technical or vocational tracks. In Germany, it's 59%. Think about that gulf. So we need to let our kids know, look, these fields, these technical jobs are going to be here for a long time. We're going to need them for a long time. And then we need to channel our educational system to put in kids on those paths that will lead to resilient, lucrative, steady jobs for quite some time. That's a big challenge, but we have to start turning the battleship in that direction as quickly as possible. I would also want high schools to teach things that are going to be relevant to kids in any field, like social and emotional learning. financial literacy. And the arts. These things correlate with success in the future. The fact that arts is one of the things that people actually try and cut back on is really incredibly short-sighted and not very smart.
I'm concerned with voter suppression. I'm with Indivisible New Hampshire, and we've been working since 2016 on this issue in New Hampshire. And you may not know, but Maggie Hassan was only elected by 1,000 votes in 2016. And right after that, the New Hampshire legislature passed voter suppression bills. We were ground zero for the discussion on this. Trump said we were busing in hundreds of people there was lots of voter fraud. We had the Kobach Commission, the whole 9 yards. In 2018, we took back the New Hampshire legislature, and we reversed those bills. And we passed an anti-gerrymandering bill, but our governor vetoed them all. So my question is there anything that can be done on the federal level to combat this voter suppression that's basically making American elections unfair? Can we do anything on the federal level to help with that?
Well, first, thank you for your leadership and activism on behalf of our democracy. This story makes me really, really wish that Steve Marchand was your governor. At the federal level, there are certain things that can be done to combat voter suppression, but it's going to be a long fight because each state does have the ability to restrict or pass laws about what's going on in the state. I know here in New Hampshire, for example, they made it harder for certain college students to vote in the state. To me, we should be making it easier to vote in pretty much any way we can to help fuel our democracy. And one of the things I'm for, which is not directly your question, is ranked choice voting. I have a whole series of pro-democracy reforms that I'm championing, like ranked choice voting and democracy dollars, which would be public financing of elections, $100 in everyone's hands that you can just give to whichever candidate you want. Because to me, we need to revitalize our democracy again. And I will have to say that if that does happen, it will happen because of the people right here in New Hampshire.
I'm a little bit nervous, but you can bear with me. It's a bit of a question, so it's really a statement. I've been following a few candidates, Senator Warren, Senator Sanders, and Mr. Yang, all really good people. I think we some of the best group of people that we have seen in a while. And but in the last week or two, I think I'm not from New Hampshire, so just to be transparent, I'm from Brooklyn, and I drove from Brooklyn this morning. Escalating tensions in the Middle East, two people on TV have talked about de-escalating, and they were very firm about it. One of them was Mr. Yang, and the other one was Senator Sanders. Am I correct? Is that,
Don't forget about Tulsi.
yeah, I apologize. I don't know everything, and I'm just one person. But I'm also here, as much as I'm here to see Mr. Yang, I'm also here to be with my fellow American. I am a combat veteran from Iraq. I love my country. I think I went into the service because I'm an immigrant, and I felt like I always had to prove myself. And I had some warped idea of what being American is, but I'm 44 now. I'm a parent. My son, reluctantly, is sitting next to me. And I think I've grown to understand that there's a lot of people who are as patriotic as me. Like James Bowen is probably just as patriotic as any service person. And everyone here, whether you're a teacher, a doctor, everyone could represent the right values. So in 2016, when they said make America great, okay, I thought they're talking about the same great that I'm thinking, meaning strong, with a lot of humanity, with a lot of humbleness. That's what I thought great was. I didn't know this is what they meant by great. So when I saw on The View that maybe this is the thing for those who didn't serve, they feel like they cannot talk about being a patriot, or that they can't talk about the Middle East because they don't have that. So one of the first questions that was posed to Mr. Yang on The View was, I don't trust in your foreign policy ability. And I can tell you, as a former drill sergeant, as a combat veteran, as someone who went to Iraq as a civilian twice, and Iran, the person that I would follow, I would not have a problem following Mr. Yang with me to combat. But more importantly, strength is being humble, strength is having patience. It's way harder to build something than to destroy it. Whether that's a relationship, whether that is a building. If you have to drop a bomb, if you have to do something bad, take a really long time. And I thank you for the strength. And I can't promise I will vote for you yet. I'll wait for this. I'm being honest, but if the voting, well, we have 10 more months. If the voting is tonight, you have my vote.
Thank you for your service. An incredible statement. I couldn't agree with you more about the fact that there are so many different ways to serve. Certainly, your form of service, I think everyone here agrees, is one of the highest forms of service, but I appreciate your generosity, including the rest of us. And I will say that there are 3 candidates that have had a very clear stance on de-escalating the conflict in Iran, me, Tulsi, and Bernie. And to me, it's very clear. 75% of Americans want nothing to do with war with Iran. And so you have to ask, why the heck were we or are we on the brink of war with Iran if 75% of Americans want nothing to do with it? And then you look at our Constitution, it says it should be an act of Congress to declare war. Congress gave up that power to the executive branch in 2001, 19 years ago, and we've been in a constant state of armed conflict since then, including in the conflicts that we've served in. So we need to get back to our constitutional principles. As your president, I would repeal the AUMF, say it should be an act of Congress to declare war. It was James Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, who said if we invest more in diplomacy, then we have to spend less on ammunition. And that should be the goal, to reinvest in our alliances and partnerships abroad, and to be able to put people like you into harm's way only if there is no other course of action.
Okay, we'll take some pictures in a minute, but first, give it up for Andrew Yang!
Celebrity sighting.
Got the water for you.
for the day. We're not over quite yet. We're going to be here for selfies, and then we're going to be heading to Portsmouth. It is the last Andrew Yang event.
We won't get in your way.
No, you're fine.
I'll try and be aware.
No, you're fine. I'm literally capturing the people as they come. This is to get the reality of the situation. So if you get in front of it, you're good.
Okay.
So sorry about that. So basically, thank you for everybody who followed and subscribed. Thank you for everybody who donated today. Incredible. I think we got close to reaching halfway through our donation goal, so I appreciate everybody. We're now going to hang out and watch as Andrew and Evelyn get pictures with all the adoring fans. And while you're sitting here watching, wondering, what can I do to help the campaign? Well, I can tell you what. You can head over to theyanggame.com. And why would you do that? Well, that's because it's a secure Aclu link that donates money directly to the campaign. We're trying to reach $2 million by the 14th. And in order to do that, we need donations. So if you were thinking about donating,